Okay, we left off with item 5, new business discussion items. And item 5A is site distance presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Jason wanted to present on this topic just because we deal with a fair amount of site distance issues across town, and just give you a sense of how he deals with it and how his crew deals with it.
Yeah.
So I know there's, let's see, are you gonna be able to do that? Can you pull up the presentation?
Yeah.
So today was Jason's day off. He was out duck hunting all day. He came back specific for this meeting.
Wow, well, thank you for your commitment to us.
No,
That's
I didn't
great.
know he was gonna take today off, or I probably would have let him bow out, but
oh no, I already committed to this before I took the day off. My son's home from college, so
Where did you go hunting?
we just went out to Sauvie Island.
Oh, okay.
that's something you and your son do together?
Yeah, and my dad, the three of us, we went out. So
Nice.
yeah, that's why I took the day off. But
Yeah. They.
anyways, like I'll just get started here. So the main reason I wanted to bring this
Since
is
it's
to
not part of the packet.
just to show the committee that we have a scientific method when we get a call for, there's a problem with site distance. We don't just kind of go out there and look at it. You know, there's an actual scientific method behind what we do. So whenever you can go to the next slide.
I don't, yeah.
Okay, so site distance is just the length of a roadway that's visible to the driver. And there's intersection site distance, stopping site distance, and passing or overtaking. And we're just gonna talk about the intersection on this one.
What is happening? Sorry.
Okay, so the driver of a vehicle should have an unobstructed view of the intersection as he's approaching the intersection. And what it creates is triangles. You have to have a clear view within that triangle. So now there's two different kind of triangles, and that's the approach triangle. You can see that one is on an uncontrolled intersection, like in a neighborhood, something where a driver is approaching the intersection at the posted speed, 25 miles an hour, whatever that posted speed is. And the other direction is also uncontrolled. So you have a site triangle that looks like that. You have distance A comes back from the intersection. That's your decision point. You have distance B, which I didn't really like this slide, but distance B is measured wrong on this slide. Distance B should be measured from the curb or from the edge of the asphalt, which will be shown better on the next slide. So we can.
What determines the size of the triangle and the shape of the triangle?
I'll get to that here in just a minute. I just want to kind of give you a quick
Okay.
overview. Now you can see how this one shows distance B is measured correctly. It's measured from the edge of the asphalt or the curb line, not from the center of the travel lane that the vehicle was traveling on. I don't know why that is that way, but it just is that way. And we can, so on, this is for a controlled intersection, as if you're sitting at a stop sign. So this decision point is always going to be either at the stop sign or 10 feet behind the stop bar. So you notice the site triangles look much different than the uncontrolled intersection site triangle. That was a much more of it's not a long triangle. This will be a long triangle because you have to be able to accelerate into traffic is why you have to have that longer triangle. And then if you're making a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn, those numbers all will change. And I think if we go to the next slide, will be now this will tell you how big your triangles need to be. this answers your question there. Because you have to look at your posted speeds of the roads, and then you start deciding, is it a controlled intersection? Is it an uncontrolled intersection? What's the posted speeds? And then you can use, Wes, can you grab those for me really quick? So there's also these tools that we have to use. We have a target rod and a sighting rod. So the one he's got in his left hand is the sighting rod. This is the one that the guy at the decision point would use. You're either 10 feet behind the stop bar, or if it's an uncontrolled intersection at 25 miles an hour, you're 115 feet back from the intersection. And then the guy with the target rod would go down the street that's perpendicular until you can no longer look over that sight, the sighting rod, and see the target rod. So they're all designed at the worst. The target rod, or the sighting rod, is designed at pretty much the worst scenario. A little car sitting there. Pickup trucks up higher, you can see a lot better. So they're designed for the worst possible situation. And that's pretty much the top of the shortest car that you would see coming. Not like a big pickup truck that you would see coming. Because not all sight distance is a tree in the way or a fence in the way. Some of it's a hill, so you can't see. And then once that car comes over the hill. So it's based on a short car and a person in a short car.
I have a question for you. This is all based on posted speed limits,
Correct.
which in most cases would be incorrect. I can give you a perfect example. I live on Oak Tree Terrace, coming on to Holcomb Boulevard. There's a hump in Holcomb to the right. And the posted speed limit is 40 miles an hour. Very few people are coming down that hill at 40 miles an hour. I would say the average is probably 45, and many of them are like 50. So when I pull out of my Oak Tree Terrace and turn left to go on to Holcomb Boulevard, many times I'll get about halfway out, and then at that time I'll see a car coming down at a fairly high rate of speed, and I really got to goose it in order to, and sometimes even at that, they'll come right up on your rear end just to let you know you got in their way. You know how that goes.
You inconvenienced them.
So I don't know if there's any solution to the question of the difference between posted speed and average speed.
I don't really.
So my best answer for that is this is based on an industry standard. There is a safety factor in these tables as well. So they take that speeding element into consideration. So that's how the industry deals with that particular issue, because in almost every instance, there's typically this concern for speeding traffic. So does this make that speeder? Do these factors make that speeding car more safe and safe enough for the vehicle that's trying to turn out into that roadway? There's probably still some concern there, or there would be still some concern there. But the idea is these distances provide a little buffer, little safety buffer with that. So that's.
So I know that when they built the homes down below us,
we're not saying that the vehicle that's trying to make that left turn is got, it's going to need all of that distance to make the stop or to make the decision as to pull out. These are just good industry standards.
Yeah, I would not want to be a motorhome trying to pull out of there. But I know that when they built the 50 or so homes below me, they actually had to lower the grade of Holcomb Boulevard by, I don't know what it was, 8 inches or 12 inches up on that hump to, I'm sure, comply with what you're talking about right now.
For John, when you say it's industry standards, what does that actually mean? Do cities formally adopt these standards? I noticed that they're looking for a motion, at least that's what it said on the agenda from this group. So have these things been used in a public policy way, or are they just more engineering in-house when you're working on signage and the like?
So these standards come out of our, the
AASHTO, Green Book.
AASHTO standard. So it's a federal standard that is used across the United States.
Yeah, okay.
So, no, we don't, and I wasn't sure if we're actually looking for a motion on this. We just wanted to provide some educational information on it. So, and Henry's not here. Did we, he could have come back. Henry could come back to our meeting.
Tell him to come back?
Oh,
Yeah.
I hope he didn't
I
leave.
just realized that as I was explaining that, because I was gonna look at Henry, because I know he knows some of this too, but
He's usually poking me in the ribs for one reason.
Yeah.
I felt
he's
kinda
probably
good.
out there having a good conversation right now, but.
So at the intersection of Partlow and South End,
Okay,
the site distance there, I mean, you have to, at the stop line,
right.
you cannot see anything. You
You have to roll forward.
You have to roll forward, into the road.
So we did do a study there. Martin and I went out and did a study looking to the south.
To the left turn, from Partlow onto the south end.
Yeah,
left
if you were
turn.
going to make a right-hand turn, so you're looking left, because there was a new
Okay,
resident moved
yeah.
into that house and they were parking their truck there. And Martin and I went out and did a site study at that intersection. And we ended up posting a no parking sign there. And because the guy had been ticketed by code enforcement. And then we were gonna put a no parking sign there, but code enforcement said, this is a bike lane. It's not a parking lane. So because there's a bike symbol in the area, that it's a bike lane, and he was told that they would wipe out his ticket if he no longer parked there, but if he continued parking there. So we have actually done a site distance on that intersection. Now, not looking to the right. We didn't.
Looking to the left,
Yeah, if you're at that intersection on Partlow on South End, looking to the left.
that's the one you can't see that way.
So if I'm understanding correctly, that work was specifically for that corner property. So if you're on Partlow, waiting to get on the south end, it's that turn to your left, right? So,
Yeah.
or right, but it's,
Yeah, the right one's kind of hard too.
yeah, but it's really looking to the left that they analyzed, it sounds like. Looking the other way, there's also kind of a curve in South End Road right there that's kind of a challenge. And that definitely requires you to move forward, especially if there's a vehicle parked along that curb line there. So, yeah, that intersection, we get a lot of concerns about that intersection, complaints about that intersection. Just the fact that there's a stop by there, people generally don't want to roll over across the crosswalk.
The property owner on that corner, as you're on Partlow, looking to the left, that property owner, doesn't he have a tall fence too?
There is a fence, but it is back from they face Partlow, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they're allowed to have their fence certain height once they get past pretty much the front of their building. So yeah, but I've never noticed that fence to be part of the site distance problem. It's more what's parked along the curb and the tree line that,
Maybe, I don't remember, there's something that blocks it.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a tree in there also.
Trees or fence.
John, a question? It seems to me that the stop bar per the manual can be relocated out toward the driving lanes under certain conditions, 15 to 20 feet, as long as you have a leader that connects it back to the stop sign. And perhaps that would be something that might be worthy of that spot, because I've noticed the same sort of thing. You really aren't going to be impacting the cross traffic, because that lane hasn't been built out to on South End Road yet. And it'd be when the time comes to pull it back, it would be a simple enough job to do that. But if the stop indicator was moved out toward the travel lane, about 15 feet, I think you would find it make a difference and would not be unsafe.
And my recollection is it's not actually a stop bar, there's
There's a crosswalk.
continental, you know, the bars that would have to then,
West Wind, if you look at 10th and Willamette Drive, they've managed to figure out a way to put the stop bar on the far side of the crosswalk, marked crosswalk.
But West Wind doesn't count to us.
But it is being done in that,
even with the continental.
oh yeah,
Well, it's our understanding that you stop before you get to the continental, and then you roll out and you look. That's the way the Oregon Driver's Manual allows for you to do, stop and look. So when we're measuring sight distance on here, that's one intersection that I think meets it, but you have to roll out. You have to be willing to roll out.
Definitely.
And I know folks don't
want to.
right? Or think that that's not allowed.
John, since this is an older community, is there a list of all these intersections and a report on the degree to which each intersection meets these site standards so that you know which ones to deal with if there's problems? Or is it just random as development occurs, you fix that, or is there a major issue, you fix that, but we don't know what the whole picture looks like?
Well, Jason may have all these down by memory, but we don't have we've not done an inventory of all our intersections, but we know where there's some problems.
Yeah.
And where we have to keep much closer look, you know, well, I don't know what the frequency is, but we do a lot of, like sign clearing maintenance, those kind of things. You want to maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we do a lot of that, going out, looking for the signs, trimming around the stop signs. We get a lot of, because it's an older neighborhood, we have a lot of street trees that are planted up near the stop signs that are they constantly need to get trimmed. We do that, and right now is when we start doing that.
And
When
does
the
your
leaves are
depart-
off.
What about other just landscaping? So a person with a corner lot puts in some new shrubbery and 2 years later it's blocking the view. Is that code enforcement or is
Yeah,
that you?
that's code enforcement. I don't get involved with their shrubbery unless it is blocking the stop sign. If it's grown up and it's blocking the stop sign, then I'll whack it down so that it's not an immediate hazard, but then it's to code enforcement. Because if we just go in there and whack down somebody's shrubs, then the calls come in and it becomes a real hassle.
So we usually notify
Yeah.
police department, that pursue it as a code enforcement action, and then it gets clear that way. But John, to answer your question, we don't have a inventory of sight distance problems around the city.
Does having a record like that help protect you from liability should, let's say it's an intersection like our chairman was talking about, and it's got a higher proportion of accidents, which we've band-aided, we really didn't get in there and fix it. Have we got more liability then?
I don't have a good answer for that question. We haven't had that kind of issue come up.
Okay, that's good.
Mike?
I got to make sure I understand this before I try to get into my question. So if it's an uncontrolled intersection and 25, you're looking for 115 feet
Each direction.
each direction? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
My house was built in 2007. It's only 11 years old. I know if you go 150, I'm on a corner. If you go 115 feet each way, you're looking through my house.
In some cases, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, every case.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm on one of the bigger lots in the subdivision, it's 7,500 square feet, so I know it's not, it's like 75 by 100 maybe? So I guess I'm asking, what's the practical impact of this as new development comes online? You would have these massive triangles on every corner in a subdivision.
Yeah, so one of your questions was, what's the interaction between land use and transportation?
Yeah.
There's kind of a direct collision right there between land use, and we see it with, especially in some of your commercial corridors where they'd like to have 0 lot line setbacks, right? And so clearly these don't necessarily work in that condition. So then it's back to a matter of, well, then how do you deal with it? It may mean that instead of using the stop sign warrant analysis that we typically do, we are obligated to put a stop sign in there just because we need them to stop, roll forward, rather than have that distance, that 115 feet or whatever it is, to roll through and look in each direction to figure out whether or not they're going to actually see cross traffic, right? So, yeah, and I guess the other thing I'd like to caveat, because I'm not sure how many more slides you have, Jason, but we've got new development like that, or newer development like that, and we've got a lot of old development that, whether it be topography or where they set the old house may be sitting in the right of way in some cases. So, yeah, we've got some areas where we've got problems like that. I wouldn't necessarily say that they're unsafe neighborhoods, but I think they, in some cases, control that speed a little bit because people can't just drive through the intersection without, awareness is always, driver awareness is always, the first kind of threshold. You've got to be thinking about cross-street traffic and that when you're going through a neighborhood without stop signs. So,
Okay, so then does this come into play at all if, let's say I'm on that corner house again, and I want to put a fence that, according to the building code, is, the 6 foot high and not out in front of the front corner of my house, but it's going to reduce that sight distance that may already be below the 115 feet, and it's going to reduce it even more. Is there any review done of a permit for that fence, or does there need to be a permit for the fence when it's going to encroach in that sight distance?
So no permit for the fence, right? That's first thing.
Right.
We find out about it usually later by complaint, right? Somebody complains about the fence impacting sight distance, and then we would have to make a determination at that point whether or not we were going to enforce that fence to be removed or lowered.
Doesn't the city code still have the 3 foot maximum height on the corners
So
for fences?
What I'm hearing here is more like, for one, you've got let's just say you've got a 25-foot setback from the back of sidewalk for a new house, right? And the way the code reads is, and I may be a little off on this, but my recollection is you can have a 3-foot fence within that first 25 feet. And then at that point where the house is flush with, right, then on that side street, you can have a 6 foot high fence right there, right? And so that's where that could come into play, where you're trying to measure your 115 feet, and now all of a sudden you've got a fence there. And how do we deal with that? Well, we struggle with that, I think, at times.
So if I'm looking at those charts,
3 feet.
and the blue ones are uncontrolled, and then you said if one of the fixes might be to control it, so you put some stop signs up. Am I interpreting that correct?
Well, I mean,
Because if you do, you got a 25 feet over here and you got a control, then you have longer sight distances,
Seems
right?
like it should be the opposite. If it's controlled.
yeah, I go back to here, let me go back.
So what you're doing is the reason it's longer is because you're at the way I read it and understand it is you're starting from a stop position. So you need to have 280 feet to be able to pull out and accelerate without being overtaken by the other car that's coming at 25 miles an hour.
So here's an interesting real issue. I live on Whitman Court, subdivision built about 2000, 2002. And we're on a cul-de-sac that comes out to Barlow. When that was built, there was no stop sign for Whitman Court coming onto Barlow. So it would have been uncontrolled. Barlow is now punched through because they got a new subdivision going through there. So they put a stop sign at the corner of Barlow and Whitman Court. And obviously, I don't think any of these triangle things were analyzed when that went in, because it requires longer triangles, if you will.
Well, if I'm understanding correctly, this would be Whitman and this would be Barlow, right?
Yeah,
So 10 feet back from there, that site distance triangle, whether that was analyzed or not, I can't say for sure, but that's how, if we got the call, we'd go out and look at it today.
Yeah, it would be, 10, either at this, depending on if there's a stop bar. If there's not a stop bar, it would be right at the stop sign.
yeah, I don't think there's a stop bar there. This is brand spanking new, so, and I think there may be some fences on one or two of those lots that you'd run into an issue on.
So this is not really a land use tool, it's an after-the-fact tool to determine that can we make any modifications that may.
I think in theory, it would be best to utilize this in
Yes.
every instance, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Every new house, every
Yes.
new, I would say we have not been doing that for time or just process-wise, right? We don't necessarily know when fences go in on our side, so
we
this
can't-
is the public
yes.
works side.
Right.
So it is a bit of a problem. We are more, this becomes more an issue as complaints arise. And then we utilize this method to figure out how to fix that. And it may mean a shorter fence requirement or removal of the fence, or in some cases it may mean, instead of, if we don't have a stop sign there, maybe we have to put in a stop sign to make that work.
And I rarely see site distance complaints in neighborhoods that are just all neighborhood streets. It seems like if there's one street that kind of becomes the through street, and maybe that's because it now got punched through to another road, then we see traffic that's going, a lot of traffic on that one street, and that's when maybe I'll get a complaint. And then we go out there and we decide, how do we try and solve this?
So, question, can if you have a right-of-way property line, can you fence all four sides of your lot?
No, not, well, yes, you can, but the front fences are 3.5 feet limitation.
Okay.
And so again, if you're on a corner lot, right, your front faces a particular, and it's really based on what your facade of your house looks like, not necessarily where your driveway is, right? So if your facade of your house faces a particular street, then everything from really the front of the house forward cannot exceed 3.5 feet. And then everything behind that facade can be up to 6 feet. And then of course, across the back of your property, it can be up to 6 feet.
So now if you're on the corner,
Yeah, if you're on the corner and this is the problem we were talking about earlier, and you got a 25-foot setback, and this fence is sitting right here, really 25 feet from that corner, it becomes a site distance problem.
It's not even the fence, it's the house.
Well, in
Because
some
if you're,
cases, if it's
if
a
you're
25
25 feet back
Yeah,
on the front, and I don't know that it's 25 feet on the side, it may be less.
yeah, it's
It's
less.
less.
It's less, so.
That entire,
House.
that house, my whole house is in it.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, I guess that's no different in Oregon City than it is in any other city. So trying to figure out, what that means for this presentation is, I don't know, I guess I'd have to look into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
I kind of wish the street trees were included as obstacles in this. If you take some of them down in McLaughlin and try to get out onto Fifth Street especially, but any of the others, you have mature street trees that are 3 feet in diameter and they line up so that the only way you're gonna see what's coming is to put the nose of your car in the travel lane.
Yeah, it's interesting. So one of the reasons why we brought this topic was because we've been having the conversation with planning about, well, it was about the zero lot line issue, right? Not only is it a site distance issue, it's an issue for franchise utilities. Because we usually require a 10-foot public utility easement behind the sidewalk. And so we were talking about that, and in that conversation, we got to talking about these side distances because a building on Malala Avenue, for instance, with some of these side streets, that's a controlled intersection. There's a stop sign there, but still, you don't really have, you know, the next one. You don't really have that 10 feet even in some cases. So if it's not signalized, then it becomes more of a problem. But even if you do, so what this wouldn't show is if there were sidewalks, for instance, with sidewalks with street trees. Even if it's a 10-foot wide sidewalk and you got street trees in tree wells, those trees can become mature and all of a sudden become, whether either they're mature or they're young, right? That was the other thing. Is they're young, everything, you know, all that foliage is pretty low. As they get older, we limb those up, but then they get to be a bigger tree. And so one of the points that we were making with planning, and haven't completely got there, is we shouldn't be planting street trees in these site distance triangles.
Does anybody have a GoPro camera or something that they can go set up on one of the side streets at a typical spot where you might have a car getting ready to turn into and just watch the traffic come down the streets and try to spot it?
I don't know, you need a GoPro, but
well, a movie camera
too. You can do it without them, right?
Yeah, but it's more impressive with a moving picture.
So, in terms of the planning, I guess, if you're trying to achieve zero setback streets, I see what, planning wants more density, of course, right? And they want street trees and stuff. But maybe you should be looking at a street section that, yes, in lieu of doing street trees and these sections, go and do planters or do something else, where you could do, say, stormwater management and have shrubs, and they'll do the purpose and maintain the visual corridor.
I agree. You could go with a wider street section, for instance.
Yeah, or do even bulb outs in those, calms down the traffic, but then it has that other benefit.
True.
And you could let them come closer to the lot line.
True.
Well, I think we need to move along here on your presentation.
Yeah, that was just about it. Yeah, just beat that one. Yeah, that's just pretty much went over all that stuff. Yeah, just a quick summary of it, but yeah. Yeah, and there's been a few times where, just like what you said, I looked at one the other day and I pulled up and I got out and I'm already looking through the house. I can't even, it doesn't do me any good to even start on this because the house is right there.
Right there.
Right on the corner. Just sitting at there's not even a stop sign, so it's an uncontrolled intersection, but I just pulled up to the intersection.
What's the process to get that stop sign? You go out there and see it and say, well, we can't really move the house, now we need to put stop signs to control the intersection, right?
Yeah, there's a whole stop sign brochure that looks at, then don't they look at crash data? And it has a whole list of the different criteria. I think you guys have probably seen that stop sign brochure.
No, but what I'm saying is when somebody initiates a complaint, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe accident happened, or maybe it was a near accident, you go investigate, you determine that house is in the way. What's the process to put a sign? Is that enough for you to go and sign the intersection?
Well, we just did one on in your neighborhood, John, that maybe it was at Winston, where we heard, we recognized that the through street, the addition of new development was justifying the need for an additional stop sign. So we don't have a lot of process there. That's really kind of up to the street department, and they may talk to the city engineer about it, or myself, and make a determination whether or not we put the stop sign in or not.
Okay.
So we don't have a lot of applications or process that way.
It's more often a parking issue is really what it
Yeah,
comes down
yeah.
to, more often than not, is we need to just put some no parking signs, move the cars away from the intersection. That's the major complaint that I get, more than we need a stop sign, like in your situation.
So, coming back to a potential liability situation. So you've gone out, you've investigated it, as the one you said, the house is in the way, there's not too much you can do one way or another. So we now have knowledge that that doesn't meet the AASHTO standards, but we haven't done anything about it. And then something happens and somebody has a lawsuit, they don't necessarily know, they're just gonna make a complaint, and we're sitting there with the information from 3 years ago, yeah, this is a problem, but we can't do anything about it.
I think it's a lot more problematic when we have it for 3 years than we do for 30 years. But I don't know, John, that whether we've got extra liability there, or if there's, I think if we've definitely designed a sight distance problem, that's one thing. If there's, if it's a new facility, for instance, then, I'm not sure where we
Yeah,
go
well, I
with
think
that, but.
you should give some thought to maybe talk to the legal staff too, and just kind of figure out how you want to characterize this stuff and how you want to record it to maximize our protection there.
Yeah, yeah. Good point.
So if somebody bought a house, an existing house, and they did some landscaping, which would, when they first put the shrubbery in, not affect the sight distance, but after 5 years of growth, it would affect the sight distance, what would be the trigger to enforce the sight distance?
It would either be we notice it ourselves and we think it's a problem, or somebody in the community calls and says, well, there's a problem. We go out and verify that, yeah, there's a problem there. That's when we would, and typically in that case, especially if it was on private property, we'd notify the property owner.
And if they didn't cut it back?
Well, it would go through a code enforcement process. So I guess eventually they'd end up in court.
But how's that, if the person buys the house, they're not aware of this thing. They're just going on their way, doing their thing, putting the landscaping. There was no information that they were not, what the code requirements are. Now you're telling them you're in violation of the code. That seems like a stretch there too. You should at least inform the public of this thing so they're aware of the code.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have an informational brochure on sight distance that we would give to every property owner that had.
Well, put it in a magazine, put it on a website, somewhere where people can understand this.
Yeah, I don't
And
disagree.
people maybe can take the action on their own and try to, help the city. Some people will be ignorant, right? And they will do nothing, and others will say, oh, well, maybe I should cut this down. Somebody can get hurt.
Or at least trim it back.
Trim it back, do something.
Yeah,
I myself wouldn't be able to do anything if I don't know what the code is.
we have a lot of code enforcement that's folks don't know, so
Yeah.
what's in the code and what would require them from doing that. For the most part, these, once they get notice that there's a safety concern there's really, I can't think of any sight distance issue that has been brought forth that we haven't, when talked to the property owner to resolve, been able to resolve.
Because some of the stuff.
But you're right. Could we have more tools on our website? Would they find them there in time? I don't know.
I could just see if you're spending money on building a fence, for example, and you put a brand new cedar fence and you spend thousands of dollars. Now somebody comes back and says, oh, we'll need you to take this out.
Yeah, we're finding other things like folks that build RV pads and they're using they happen to have an ADA ramp on the corner. And rather than using their driveways for, we've got one in code enforcement right now. Thousands of dollars have been put into an RV pad next to the house that is not anywhere near his driveway. It's near the corner of the intersection, and he's been using the ADA ramp to drive his RV.
Maybe you should put a stop sign there.
So I mean, yeah. So I don't disagree. I mean, I'm just, this kind of went, it's good questions. Just really kind of wanted you to know that we do have methods for reviewing site distance problems, and that's what we use to try to fix them. Those instances when you got a house sitting there, it makes it difficult.
You know, that's something you might consider, though, for an informational blurb in the city's quarterly newsletter.
Yeah.
Or magazine.
Yeah.
Because you've got a regular column in there already now, so might think about it.
Will do.
Some catchy little headline, corner lot owners beware.
Point them to the website code.
Yeah, one other thing I'm gonna go back and look at is, I've done a lot of radar speed studies in neighborhoods, and they're usually between about 15 and 18 miles per hour average speed. So I wanna go back and read and see if we can use an average speed rather than a posted speed. Because a lot of people tell me, oh man, cars are doing 25 or 30 or 40 miles an hour in my neighborhood. And usually it's not. It's usually, the average speed is around 15 miles an hour in neighborhoods.
That's because they remember the 10 that went fast.
Yeah, they
and
do.
They don't
They
remember
always
the
remember the
200s that went
speeder.
slow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to go back and read some more about that and see if we can use, if we did a study, we could use an average speed rather than posted speed in neighborhoods.
Well, and you'd have to probably go even further than that, because the average speed on a particular thoroughfare would give you false information about a specific location on that thoroughfare.
All right.
I move that we move on.
Move that you move on.
Second.
The next one's pretty easy. As you recall, there was some testimony at this meeting about Central Point Road and the desire for a speed zone change. And so the city pursued that with the state. One of the requirements that we do a survey. We did an online survey for that. We got a lot of feedback from that online survey. This is about Central Point Road and really from Partlow to the city limits. And the road at the city limits there is Parish. And so we did some review of speeds and determined that we really wanted to limit the request of the state for the speed study between that area and not have them look at all of Central Point Road. So they did that. They approved a 35 mile an hour zone, and we got that speed zone order from the state just recently, and it's already posted. And we didn't have a picture of it, but I got a picture today from Wes. So we didn't include that in your presentation, but I see it here in bright colors with the orange flags on it and everything. So that was a pretty good process for getting through that. And it's the first time we've done an online survey to get community buy-in and input. And so 35 miles an hour for Central Point from the city limits all the way to Warner Parrott.
What was before?
It was 45, yeah, 45 for that section between, that was the only section that was posted at 45 between Partlow and the city limits. The rest of it was 35. So it's consistent now, the entire stretch. I gotta remember what.
Next item is the Public Works report.
Yeah, my ducks in a row here. So some of this isn't in your packet just because I got late I've got the items listed are in your packet, but I just, this drawing here shows Beaver Creek in 213, and it's been in your packet before. So I just thought it would be a good reminder that we went through the alternate mobility study in Oregon City. We've got that approved through the Planning Commission. The City Commission went on to the Oregon Transportation Commission, which is the state, and they approved the changes that the city was proposing, which was to allow for more congestion during certain hours of the day, mostly in the morning, and definitely during peak hours of the day. There was also this project here that was identified, which is at some point building a acceleration lane that wouldn't require a yield, so it'd be a through right-hand turn pocket off of Beaver Creek onto 213, and then enough lane there to allow for acceleration. So there's some other little projects. There's the sidewalk project on Beaver Creek Road, and some safety measures that were suggested in that alternate mobility study, but that's now approved. It's also, this project's also been added to both the city's transportation system plan and also the regional transportation plan. So that means we can pursue funding through the regional pots of money that come available every once in a while for this project here. It would also mean that if a development were to trigger a need for that, that we could condition that development to at least build a portion of this project. So,
John, does that acceleration lane require any fill, or are they going to use the existing pavement?
I think that the hope was that they could not have to do a lot more fill.
And you were not
Pretty wide
conditioned,
shoulder there.
you were not conditioned to build this in order for them to accept that alternate mobility?
Not conditioned to build it, it just needs to be in our plan.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, although there's congestion there, this still is not, I mean, it'd be nice to have, but
This is not going to alleviate.
it's not warranted until we see more growth out in the Beaver Creek area. So we'll probably pay for a bunch of this using transportation SDCs that come in through the Beaver Creek concept area. Okay. I don't remember. This next one was the tunnel illumination project and the electronic advanced warning system on 99E and Railroad. There's a flyer that's going around. We don't have any of these slides, right?
I mean, well, is that the I-205?
No, it's the Tumwater closure plan there. So there's a couple things that are happening with this project. Well, the main project was about adding new illumination in the tunnel, the railroad tunnel at 99E and Railroad Avenue. So that's really was the main project. But then we have a project that was conditioned by the state for development with the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. So there was 3 projects that came out of the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, master planning effort, and the state required both. There was 3 things. They wanted a little intersection design change at Railroad Avenue and 99E. They wanted some advanced warning signage on 99E as you come down the hill into Oregon City. And then they wanted a little pork chop over by what used to be Water Avenue. So those are the 3 projects. This is one of them. This is the advanced warning system on 99E. And that's not exactly what what's showing in this drawing, but there's a couple things that they're doing beyond the illumination. They're putting in that advanced warning system, but they're also closing the ability to make a left turn as you're coming up 99E onto Tumwater. So there's a couple of graphics. Can I have that pointer? Yeah.
So why
So
don't they?
this drawing here just reflects, this is 99E, the overlook for the falls, that parking lot. It sits right here. This is Tumwater. So right now people can come up. There's not really a dedicated turn pocket, but they can sit there and make that left turn up and go up Tumwater. And they're not necessarily putting a hard barrier there, but they're changing the signage and they're changing the striping. And we had, let's see, how do I get forward?
It's, you gotta just click on the tab at the top.
No, that's a different project.
Oh, the one more.
John, can you come off of Tumwater?
Right there.
Tumwater and turn right to go down 99? I didn't think so.
It's a one-way right now, and so
Yeah.
it'll, this
Basically
will,
shuts the whole thing down.
yeah, it will not allow traffic on that stretch right now. So they're basically, I mean, there's no, like I said, there's no hardscape necessarily, but they'll remove the street name sign here. They'll, fill in this striping, the double yellow, and then they'll paint the white stripe through. They'll be signing it with do not enter signs.
Why don't they just eliminate the street altogether?
So that may happen over time, but right now, this is part of an emergency response plan so that when 99E gets closed, and it happens almost annually due to rockfall, but maybe for another reason, whatever the reason is, when they close 99E, if it's an emergency, when they have a planned closure, they usually notify all the freight community to go and use 205 and not come 99E, right? But in situations where they need to close it for an accident, the emergency response plan includes for those trucks, because because South End Road is load limited, the implementation is supposed to be that they'll come up to South 2nd Street, they'll make the left onto South 2nd Street, they'll come back down Tumwater and do a U-turn there, basically. So that's the reason why we've been opposed to them closing that. They wouldn't mind closing it, to be honest with you, but then that puts truck traffic on South End Hill, which is already load limited, so that's why, Bob. And then this is really kind of the bigger piece. I think this here comes out, this cantilevered sign that right now has at Tumwater and South 2nd signage on it. And there's also I think a tunnel or a curve ahead sign on this one, and a rider for speed.
It's a speed warning sign,
Yeah.
I think.
So, and what they'll be replacing that with is another support, and then there will be for traffic that's coming down the hill, there'd be an electronic reader board that basically warns the traffic as they're coming down the hill that there's congestion ahead. Because those of you that have used it know that sometimes traffic backs up at Main Street and it backs up into the tunnel. And when that happens, people sometimes misjudge their speed coming down the hill. And so this will just give them a heads up that that's coming. And then just changing the street signage to eliminate that Tumwater option. So I think.
Can you email these out to us?
Yep.
Of course, nobody would be doing 45 or 50 down the hill into the tunnel.
Never say never. Any questions on the Tumwater illumination project and electronic advanced warning system topic? Okay. There's another little update. And what I really wanted to do was to get to the website, but what do we have there? See if you can get to the website.
Hey,
Give us a second
they do
here.
it all on the computers. Do
Maybe.
simulations.
Yeah.
It's probably much,
Or if this is like that
it's gonna be
computer.
much more efficient.
Martin's office.
It seems like it.
Well, in the interest of time, so what I wanted to get to was the project website. Maybe we can, but ODOT's got a pretty useful project website for the I-205 widening project. And
Wow.
that takes us there. Thanks.
Oh my God.
So, pretty easy to get to, I205corridor.org, and you can find good information there. I thought that I'd run through this a little bit with you, just as an informational item. First of all, we haven't met with ODOT in a while. They've progressed with their design work and have found the funding that they need to complete the design work for the Abernathy Bridge phase of the project. So that includes the intersection of Highway 43. So there's a couple of cool videos here that we won't probably watch the whole thing on, but I thought that they were kind of unique in that they show what they're proposing for the intersection of Highway 43 and really the interchange and Willamette Drive. So they're proposing a roundabout there, and they're really showing a couple of, they call it opening year AM peak, and then I think this one's opening year PM peak. And these vehicles and the amount of congestion I took to represent exactly what they think is going to be there at the opening year of that roundabout, which is probably 4 years out. So the AM peak looks pretty good on this one. I didn't necessarily see much in the way of congestion, but the PM peak looks a little different, and depending on what time you get there, it gets a little more backed up. You see backup starting here, and it gets worse as you go through the day. It's kind of a fun tool to look at if you're into that kind of thing.
But this is probably still gonna be more efficient than what's currently out there.
Way more efficient than what's going on, now, but I wanted you folks to know that tool existed, and it's neat to actually see.
I could foresee a video game based on that.
There you go. Yeah.
That's where it came from.
With the pedestrian trying to get across
There
the
you
traffic
go,
circle.
yeah.
Frogger.
I mean,
Points and all.
I got to give ODOT credit. They've really done, I think, a good job of trying to share what it is that they're designing and how they think it will work. Definitely more information on the bridge itself and how they're going to build that, and a lot of details. The other thing that I thought was kind of interesting was they're showing you that section of 205 as you come northbound before you get to the Oregon City. I think they call it the Lake Oswego off-ramp, but I like to call it the Oregon City off-ramp. Before you get to that or the bridge, there's a couple of rock outcrops there, and those have been pretty concerning for this project, but in order to do what they need to do, they're actually proposing to do some pretty deep rock drilling and rock blasting, and there's a lot of information in here about noise. So I think the point there is it's going to be noisy for a few months while they're hammering on rock in that corridor. And so this is kind of the existing corridor, and they're just showing how they need this extra width. So they're going to actually have to drill and shoot that rock and hammer it out of the way and haul it away and do all the kinds of things you would expect for a widening project. So again, good information on the website if you're interested in it. Still quite some time to go to figure out how to pay for this project, but the design work is, they've found the money for the design work. And Henry, based on your comments about tolling, that's still a debate that's out there, right? About how to pay for that. But any questions on So we're supposed to, I got an email from ODOT project manager and they'd like to get together with us again. There is definitely some impacts on the Oregon City side that don't show up very well in these drawings. This is probably the closest thing that shows up there, which is, if you remember in November election, there was an item that because this area here is in the park, this kind of use for a construction impact on a park required a vote of the people, and we got the vote from the people, so they were successful with that. And so that allows for really this abutment and, you know, just some of the access that they need just to get to some of these other places as well is all gonna affect both Sportcraft and John Storm Park. So
Those existing supports will be removed, right?
yes, yeah.
Kind of boggles my mind that they think they can take and make new bridge span supports, well, and remove the old ones without actually dropping the bridge in the water.
Yeah, hopefully they'll get that right.
The Selwood Bridge was a great example that they rolled the bridge into place and or rolled the old one out of the way.
Yeah, but they didn't build the new piers without pulling the old ones.
That's true.
I think look, they built the bridge right on 213, they slid it in place. I mean, if you have a great contractor, I think anything is possible.
It says in here they're gonna slide it, so it implies it.
Yeah.
We have to have faith in the engineers.
That's why I'm wondering.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of geology associated with this too, because the river bottom is unique. So, yeah, lots of challenges with that one, but more than I could really answer for you, because I don't know too many of the details, but wanted to share that.
At least this bridge will be hopefully standing after the seismic event.
So I think I'm done with graphics. Just a quick update. Myers Road, we're still working through plan review. We're working on an agreement with BPA, and we're working on land acquisition. Those are the big items, but for the most part, we're about finished with ODOT comments, and we're really pretty close with BPA as well. So we'll be raising one tower to get Myers Road in, and really our question right now is how much construction work can we do with the tower in place, because it takes them quite a bit of time to get to a point where they're actually going to be able to have the steel and the parts to do what they need to do to raise that. So we'd like to start with construction. In fact, we'd like to bid it next spring and get moving with that project. So that's where we're at with that. Malala Avenue, was this in the packet?
No.
Okay, so there's, I think, a paper copy of the schedule there, and really, I just highlighted a couple things. So Malala Avenue from Beaver Creek to 213, we got a grant to do that. We've talked about that in the past, so it's about an $8 million project, and we got about $4 million from Metro to do that project. Most of the work happens on what would be if Malala is running north-south, it would be on the west side of the roadway. There will be some work on the east side, but most of it's targeted for the west side of the road. So new sidewalks, everything. New signalized intersections at Gaffney Lane and Claremont. We're gonna do an analysis about whether or not there should be one at Fur as well. New pavements, new signage, new bus stops, the whole thing. There would be an entry facility, street lighting, those kind of things. So it's pretty much a complete boulevard with the caveat that a lot of the sidewalks that exist or a lot of the areas that are new will not change, right? So Biscuits, for instance, is my favorite landmark out there on Malala Avenue, where Biscuits was redone a few years ago. The other one is the feed store, Wilco. So those won't necessarily get redone necessarily unless there's a problem with them that we find in the design work. But the idea is to not have to redo those areas. But the intersections are the biggies, right? We're probably going to see some median work in there, and we're also talking about creating some mid-block crosswalks for pedestrians to be able to more easily cross Malala Avenue.
Would Fur be realigned a little bit because it's off kilter, is it, a little bit?
Well, we may learn some of that in the design phase. I can tell you we don't have the budget to do that. That would be a much bigger change for us.
What were the additional signals you were mentioning?
They're not additional, they're replacement.
Oh, okay.
So the signals that are there are
You're going to put
pretty
smart ones
ancient,
in?
smart, much smarter signals, yeah, and new, right? So right now they're on span wires, so there'll be signal arms. I don't know if we're going with decorative, but I think we're going with decorative bases and, make sure that all the corners are ADA accessible, head buttons are activated, and probably have provisions for the sight impaired, we'll meet all those standards, latest and greatest when it comes to signalization.
So I was asked to bring up this question about this project. I believe it's Gaffney where intersection is with Burgerville and Fred Meyer, that you have 2 crosswalks to go across, but only one actually lands at a sidewalk. Because if you're leaving on the Burgerville side, like you're going to Fred Meyer, there's a crosswalk there, but then there's no sidewalk, there's nothing, you end up standing in the street, basically. So is there any provision to solve that in some respect?
Yes. So all that'll be reconfigured. And one of the big questions that come from the neighborhood is just the signal phasing there, right?
Mhm.
And can that be changed so that people can get out of Gaffney Lane, because right now they have to yield.
Right.
So yes, all that will change. My recollection though on the crossing is, I don't think you can cross on the Burgerville side. I think you can cross Gaffney, but you can't cross Malala.
And if you did cross there, you would have sidewalks on Malala, but there's
Oh,
no sidewalk
I
into
have it
Fred Meyer.
backwards.
There's no
I have it
sidewalk into
backwards.
Fred
So
Meyer.
if you're on the other side, where the crosswalk is, you get to the other side, and there's no sidewalk, you're walking down the Fred
Right.
Meyer
Right.
driveway,
Yes.
basically.
And
And then
that's-
there is no crosswalk on the other side, but the sidewalk's over there.
Yeah.
And
My apologies. Yeah.
really, that's Fred Meyer's problem,
Right, or the bank.
or the bank, yeah. I'm not sure who owns the property.
So, big project, lots to come, lots of public involvement planned for this project as well. And so I just wanted to go quickly through.
To that end,
Uh-huh.
I would highly encourage reaching out to the chamber for their input, and because I know they were interested in talking to the business owners along Malala and saying, hey, this is what's coming up. But I think it would behoove both the chamber and Public Works if there was a coordinated effort there,
Okay.
so that there's no miscommunication in the sense of they're out doing work and you guys say, well, gee, we're already done.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. So to that point, the project team, which is a firm called OBAC, and they've got several sub-consultants. One of the key things that they're working on as we speak is a public involvement and communications plan that will talk about key stakeholder groups, just like the chamber. Obviously, all those businesses along there, the neighborhoods. There's community college, Clackamas County, a pretty far reach with that. So figuring out that communication plan, figuring out, how we do open houses, where we do open houses, how we do one-on-ones, those kind of things. So pretty big effort that's being drafted right now to figure out what's the right approach there.
That comes with the bike lanes and all.
Yeah, the Metro grant was mostly about pedestrians and bicyclists. So those are the bigger goals. It's not necessarily going to move a lot more vehicle traffic. We're not planning any new lanes along there. In fact, probably some channelized lanes, probably things like trying to make sure driveway widths are designed right and reduced so that we've got some access standards so that pedestrians aren't having to worry about crossing vast landscape to get across the driveway. So there'll be a lot of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's really about making it more pedestrian and bike friendly at the end of the day. But let's see. So overall schedule, we've already started. We started in November. The final completion date is December 2020. So let's keep our fingers crossed. It's a pretty aggressive schedule actually to kind of get there. So we're working on this public involvement outreach plan and hope to have that wrapped up by mid-January. And then the other things I noted is you may have seen surveyors already out there, so they've been working out there the last few days. You may have seen some geotechnical drilling, because that's mostly happened at night or early morning. But you may have noticed that. And they're starting to do some of the traffic analysis already to complete the full traffic study on that. And then our intent is to get to a bid period of about a year from now, right? So have a set of construction drawings out for bid in about a year, and then complete the project about a year later. And the other thing that we've, in some of our master plan work for our water system, which I know you guys don't dabble in water too much, but we took our water master plan because we saw some things that weren't quite matching what we had we're noticing in the field, and have taken a much tighter look at the hydraulic model that we had built back in 2012 and informed that with a lot of new information. And one of the things that we've realized is we need a bigger water line. So Malala Avenue needs to go south. Our water line, our water distribution system needs to go south. And so we're going to use this opportunity to put in a large diameter water line down Malala Avenue. So that's another element to the project we hadn't planned on, but we're going to get it in there. So
But that's coming out of the separate funding mechanism.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it'll come out of the water fund and probably water SDCs.
Are the engineers updating your cost estimates based on the observed rise in costs of various things?
Yes, yeah, for the water in particular. We just did transportation not too long ago. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Water, we're also looking at pretty hard, because it's a fair, it's quite different from what our 2012 water master plan had in terms of capital recommendations.
I'm thinking about costs of steel and iron and such now that we have these wonderful tariffs in place.
Yeah, the cost estimates for buildings in particular, I heard they're growing 3% every quarter for buildings. I don't know if you're seeing that, Sedimir, and I don't necessarily know that that's true for civil, but for building construction, they're seeing cost increases of 3% a quarter. Can you imagine that? That's a lot.
Yeah, because that's compound.
That's all I had.
Okay. Future agenda items. Next month will be the nominations and elections of a new chair and vice chair. So we'll be sure to get those on our January agenda. Mike has resigned from our committee. He's got too many other commitments. Enjoyed having you with us, short time.
I've enjoyed doing it.
You will be missed.
Thank you.
So we'll have to get going on advertising for another position.
Yep.
For the TAC. And Kim, would you notify the maintenance department that there's a light up there that's in the strobe mode? It's bugging me all night long.
Caught my eye a few times too.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything to add?
Do we need to talk through the results?
Maybe not with them in the.
Yeah. So do we want to close this meeting and hold over to talk about the results?
Yeah. This meeting is adjourned.
Okay.